Hey ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan VanHorn, CPA and ABV, founder of dentistmetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice. Today's show features Dr. Jarrett Hulse, and this is part one of an interview I really enjoyed. I think you will too. To be honest, I wish all of my interviews were like this. Dr. Hulse is a practicing dentist. He's been an owner for about 3 years. He's, from 0 to 3 years, he's gotten to right around $1 million in production a year. He may, exceed that at some point. So it's really exciting to be able to talk to Dr. Hulse because he was literally in a lot of our audience's shoes just 3 years ago today. So you're going to learn about more about Dr. Hulse in a second. But first, here are a few things you're going to hear about. We're going to learn the important lessons that Dr. Hulse learned about burnout and how he evolved as a dentist to avoid it altogether. We're going to learn about how he had set a goal of buying a TV, and he bought this $5,000 TV right after quitting his job. He had no patience, and he was deferring loans, and it forced him to figure out his career at that point. We're also going to learn about the economic situation that drove Dr. Hulse from being a dentist in the heart of New York City to choosing Middle America as the best place to set up his new venture. So at the end of this episode, I've put together my own thoughts in a bonus clip to share how you can overcome adversity in your situation, as well as some other thoughts about today's episode. So be sure to listen all the way through the entire interview to get access to that. So now on to today's guest interview with Dr. Jarrett Hulse. Dr. Hulse, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Dr. Hulse has a really great story. Dr. Hulse is a private practice owner out of Austin, Texas. Nothing was given to Dr. Hulse. I'm sure a lot of you are going to be able to resonate with Dr. Hulse's story today. He hails from New York City and is now in Austin, Texas. It's a pretty big move for people who know anything about New York City. And he's going to share with us today a lot of his successes, what happened, how in him getting into private practice, and we're just going to talk about a lot of the different things that happened throughout his journey into practice ownership. And Dr. Hulse has been very, very gracious into giving us his time today to be able to share with other people his story, so that hopefully you'll be able to take something from today's interview and take it into your own life, consider it, and maybe you'll get one little thing out of today's episode that's going to help you get over some type of obstacle to go into entrepreneurship. So, Dr. Hulse, to get us started today, tell us a little bit about, I alluded to it a little bit just in that introduction, but tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. Yeah, so, when you listen to podcasts or interviews, usually you hear people that have been super successful and now are selling how they did that, or they have some type of service that will help someone. I don't have any of that. I'm just an average dentist. I don't have anything to sell. I don't have anything great story that will amaze you and be super jealous of me or anything like that. But I feel that I have a very common story. I feel like I do have a new dental practice, about 3 years coming up soon, start up from scratch. So my story is that, I've been practicing for a while. I've also been practicing for a decade. But I feel like I have successful practice, so I feel like I can explain some things just about that you may relate to, maybe more average, and see some things I've overcome and how I've overcome them. And so we can go into more detail there. I don't know if you wanted me to start from the very beginning, Jonathan, or if that was a good intro.
No, that's a great intro. So let's start with you've graduated dental school. Tell us where you went to dental school, what year you graduated, and what you did right afterwards.
So I graduated University of Pittsburgh in 2005. Born and raised in New York City, but went to Pittsburgh for school. I did get into NYU, but I liked Pittsburgh better, and I was whatever your age, you're 20, 21 when I went there. Spent 4 years. I got a good education, but I did want to go back to New York City. I liked the school. I learned, but I wasn't a fan of Pittsburgh, the city itself. Just coming from New York City was very different. So I was going back to New York City. I did a GPR residency in Kings County Hospital, which is in Brooklyn. We were fond of saying at the time that, I don't know if it's true or not, or it still is, but it was the #1 puncture center in North America, which means like gunshots and knife wounds. So we saw a lot of trauma and saw a lot of stuff there, and trial by fire type thing. And it was a good year. I learned a lot there. So after that, though, I got my license actually through residency, which at the time was a choice. You can either take the NERB or you can get it through residency, and I was doing a residency anyway, so I'd actually take the NERB. And then got my license, and actually in New York, just a side fact, you actually it's required to take residency now. I think, at least as a couple of years ago, it's still only the choice. But it's the only state that's required to do residency, I believe. At least that was how it was a couple of years ago. But anyway, so then I went to private practice. I worked many different associate jobs. You know, between the time where I started in private practice, working in associateship, and opening my own practice, I probably worked in at least a dozen different nightmares. So it was some vast majority. Some of them were really short, just a couple weeks. You know,
tell us about one of the ones that was only a couple weeks. What happened?
It's a very typical story. It's something that people probably can relate to. You go in. New York doesn't have corporate dentistry. You know, even though it wasn't as big 10 years ago when I got out, even now there's not very much corporate dentistry there, and I'm not 100% sure why. The corporations probably look in New York and see how it's not a great place to open a practice, but because it's so competitive, so they probably, and so expensive, and so they probably they don't have any of the things that draw people there. I mean, corporations are not going to choose it because they want to live there. I mean, that's not why, you know, so they're going to choose it for the business side. And anyway, there's not a lot of corporate there, but there is a lot of there's Medicaid practices, and there's a lot of just, you go to these places in Queens and Brooklyn and even Manhattan, and you can't believe how dirty they are. And my first job, I think I had 2 jobs first. I think it was 2 part-time jobs, and one of them just wasn't busy. But the other one, you know, they have me straight out of school seeing, I don't know, 15, 20 patients a day, and 2, 3 booked at the same time. You don't really know what you're doing. You know, at that point, you don't even know what you don't know, even coming out of school. And so, you know, I feel like I had a decent education. I just based that on basically the other residents in my residency. I felt that I knew more than some of them, and they would come to me for advice, which was funny, but I guess it's just different schools. So that's why I based on, I feel like I got a good education off of. But even then, I still didn't know anything.
So what was your first warning sign of those ones? Was you just walked in and you're like, oh gosh, it's one of these?
No, because I didn't even know. That's how little I knew about dentistry beforehand. I know one of my family. I have an uncle who's a dentist in California, and spent a tiny bit of time with him, but I really never didn't assist or do lab work or anything like that beforehand. So it didn't really happen. When it was a job, I was happy, you know, and but that didn't last. You know, I get burnt out. I just remember, and I probably lasted a while at one of my first 2 jobs, probably like 9, 10 months, something like that. But by then, I hated myself and dentistry. I remember just going to the deli or diner actually at lunch and just being burnt out by lunchtime. And I would come home, and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, would just be, you couldn't talk to me for like a half hour after I got home. I just had like decompress. But that's when I started also finding Dental Town and CE in general, continuing education. I went to I remember I would come home and I would spend hours just reading Dental Town and just seeing some clinical stuff, but also just seeing that there's better stuff out there, that there are dentists that are happy, there are dentists that are doing this awesome type of dental work and treatment, and that they have nice practices that are making money and they're happy, and all the opposite things of what I had. So I would kind of learn from that and look to that and like, okay, it's gonna be something better. So, and I also went to my first CE course after I actually remember it was, everyone knows Louis Malmacher. He's like in every dental, he does facial aesthetics now and Botox and whatever, thermal fillers. And anyway, he's in all the magazines. But this was just my first course. I picked it randomly, and it was actually a really good course because he's been on the circuit for a while and he's just a good speaker. And I was like, oh, wow, look at all this. And I was excited to be there. And, then I'm sitting next to the guys who were just there to get their credits. It was very different. Anyway, so that's how I started getting involved in education. When I was in dental school, I was not at the top of my class. I was at the bottom of my class, I would say. But I was pretty good in once we got into treating patients. I don't know if I had good hands or whatnot, but I was good at that. So I found myself there, and I knew I was pretty good. I had some type of talent for what we do in that sense. That was probably the one maybe better than the average thing I had was my hands, and that probably just comes from when I was a kid. I was just artistic. I would paint little miniatures and all those nerdy things that like the 40L version does. That was me. So I was good at working on little things. I would build models and stuff like that. But I do remember, I still remember this. The one biggest compliment I got in dental school was there was a doctor, Dr. Jockers. I wasn't usually in his clinic. But I forget they were renovating ours, so we were kind of shoved in another one. I had been with him in pre-clinic, but I just did some big amalgam filling. Wasn't anything special, but he takes me aside after he comes and checks, and he's like, Jared, come over here. And he's like, you're not run of the mill, And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And it doesn't sound like much, but I don't know. To me, I still remember that. And it also kind of doubly hit home because the same day I saw him take another kid aside, and I didn't know I was watching or hearing, but he took him aside, and it was like, I won't say his name, but I do remember his name. You're subpar, he told him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is typical dental school crap where they usually make you feel bad. But still, that made my compliment feel better because he was saying the opposite to someone else. Anyway, I kind of got off track there.
No, but you said the compliment about how you're a little unique, and I see that the name of your practice is actually Austin Artistic Dentistry. So it's really interesting that you tapped into your strengths there.
Yeah, but in some sense, but so that's a little bit of a strength I have there. There are guys that are way better than me. I'm still learning as far as cosmetic dentistry goes. I'm still doing that. I do mostly family dentistry. We do some cosmetic stuff. I'm not. It's really, excuse me, really straight general stuff. I do a little bit of everything. So I've been taking on a CE, but I wouldn't say I do like that. I put that in there, but it's the same thing that you hear people say. The joke is, or not. The dentists say you're a cosmetic dentist. Well, show me, the non-cosmetic dentist. Everyone's a cosmetic dentist, and it sounds too cosmetic for artistic. It's kind of the same thing,
Sure.
But,
yeah. So we were so you were talking about your associateships.
My first associate. So I remember I was burnt out about 10 months, and I quit. I just quit my job. I did not have another job. In dental school, everyone always wanted a car. I'm from New York City. I didn't want a car. I wanted a giant TV. And I always wanted a giant TV. That was my dream. And TVs were just getting big around then. I think the plasmas were just coming out. So before that, it was like the DLPs, they were called. But anyway, so I quit my job, had no prospects, and bought a giant, at the time, TV. I mean, like a ridiculous TV. Like it was like almost $5,000 this TV. You can buy a $5,000 TV now. I still have it. It's right over there. But you can buy the same TV for like $800 now. But anyway, so I didn't work for like 2 or 3 months, and I was just living off the money I made, which wasn't a lot, but I wasn't paying my loans back. I was on deferment at the time. I was living in a crappy apartment in Brooklyn by myself. So I had enough to pay my bills for several months. And I was also used to living off of my residency salary before that. But anyway, 3 months later, my girlfriend, wife at the now, said, you got to work. And we basically I wrote a letter and wrote my CV, my resume, and I wrote a letter just saying, I'm looking for a decent place to work, and really care about patients. I'm into continuing education, and blah blah blah. And I sent it to pretty much as many addresses, dentists in Manhattan that I could find. And I was a Manhattan snob. I grew up in Manhattan, even though I lived in Brooklyn at the time. I was like, I gotta be in Manhattan. Which was silly because I never lived in Manhattan after that. I lived in Queens after that. But anyway, so I don't even remember how many, a couple hundred maybe, and just randomly sent them out. And I got a few responses. It was really my wife's doing. She basically kicked me out of my own apartment, and I had to get back to work. And yeah, but I did find a job from there. And at this point, there was even a couple before then that I had worked at for literally a short amount of time. So this is probably like my fourth job already. And then in that time, I probably interviewed a few places. They were just, I don't know, they were just dirty. And you can, even from day one, you can just see that moral people doing things incorrectly and not getting paid right, and equipment is broken, and just, I mean, I'm sure there's a million dentists out there that know exactly what that is. I would say more do than don't. I very rare, in my opinion, to find a very good associateship job. But from this mailing, I did find a decent job in that it was a nice office. It was like a couple blocks from Times Square. Looked very nice. The doctor seemed nice. He's a nice guy. He's still my friend. But I was his first associate, and he had actually hired another associate literally like the week before. But he liked my letter so much that he decided to hire us both. So here he goes from having never having an associate to having two associates. And the truth is, he really didn't need really need an associate for. I think he's come to realize it now. I don't believe he has one now, maybe, but he's very busy. He was there for 15, 20 years, but it was very old school in that he didn't market. He has a lot of family in the area, big community with his temple, I believe, and he also, he struggled, and he was at a point where he was busy, but he didn't have a big new patient flow. He didn't have a new patient flow to support one associate, let alone two associates. He was we'd do what he did. We'd sign up for the PPO plans, and they would just come in, and that's your marketing. And obviously that's not true. I mean, usually if you need a associate, you should probably double your marketing that you've been doing, let alone just rely on whatever was helping you, supporting you. But even though I had no patients and I wasn't making any money, there was nice equipment, there was nice people, it was a nice location, and I had been burned so badly, and so I didn't want. I stayed there for about 3 years basically, and which was way too long. But I was meeting my wife. I got married. Trying to figure out what to do, but I didn't know what to do because I had several other friends. And the funny thing is, I had several other dentist friends around graduated at the same time in New York City, and I had the best job. I had the best one, and it was I was making no money, and but it was it was a good place. It looked good on the surface, and I enjoyed going there. I just wasn't getting anywhere in my career, and so eventually we started trying to figure out what to do, and basically had to move. I mean, that was the bottom line. You can open a practice in New York City. There are plenty of successful dentists in New York City, but it'll take you a long time. It'll take you, if you start off, it'll take you, it could take you a decade to be doing well. And, and also, a lot of the things that you are traditionally you do in a startup or any business, any dental business to market, you can't do in New York City. Can't, get a good location, very visible. Can't do that. You're going to be on the 50th floor next to 3 other dentists in that building. You can't afford a storefront. It's impossible. I said earlier there was no corporate dentist, but there was one company from Spain that I guess it was a corporation in Spain in some sense, and they bought around that time, I think it was 14 practices, and they were storefronts. And within 3 years, every single one of them had failed. So their model didn't work in New York City. I had a friend who worked for one of them, but Anyway, also, mailers. Okay, you're gonna mail out 5,000 mailers, 10,000 mailers. All right, so that's gonna cover like one block. I mean, seriously. And can't have a sign. No signs. That sign right over there. I'm on 2 blocks from Times Square. I'm gonna pay probably $50 a month for that sign over there, whatever. Crazy. I mean, it's probably the most expensive signs in the world right there. So you can't do any of the marketing things. It's all internal marketing, which is obviously great, but it takes a lot longer. Also, demographics are horrible. I mean, okay, 1 to 1,500 is a national average. There are places that are a third. There's places in the city that are 1 to 500. There are buildings. I don't know why it's this way. There are dentists all over, but there are certain blocks, like on 57th Street, where every building has 20 dentists in it, and several on the same floor. So how do you get patients? How do you build? It just takes time and internal marketing. Just be nice to all the best ways, but not something it's good to rely on when you're first starting.
Absolutely. So what drove you to be able to? So you at this point that it's too competitive for your stomach, for your liking, for you to be able to do yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do to start looking for another area to live in?
Well, so I start. It's kind of I grew up in New York City. Now I didn't even remember now. I got my license in New York because through residency, but I've been practicing at this point after 3 years for about 5 years. A lot of places have reciprocity where they'll give you a license after 5 years because you've been a dentist, so they'll grant you a license. So I was like, all right, that's what I'll use. So, but anyway, I started looking around, trying to figure out how to do this. Do I want to buy a practice or do I want to start up? But still very unorganized, still very just abstract. But I started thinking about it. Most conventional logic is that buying a practice is more often a better business deal. 5 years out, the people who started up versus who bought an existing practice, those ones are usually doing better. But so I was kind of leaning towards that. But then I went to all my time spending on Dental Town. I went to San Antonio. I went to Breakaway, Scott Lumen's course, Breakaway there. So that was probably 2009, I think. So I'd been out maybe 4 years. And that was and I saw that, and that gives you a big boost. There's not a lot of resources out there to help a startup or practicing, or just, there are more now, like this podcast and many other podcasts. So it just feels like there's more in the past few years, which is great. But there weren't a lot of resources, even this 5, 6 years ago. It seems, probably with the internet, I guess, it's becoming there's more resources, but you still have to look for them. But anyway, so I went there. We were thinking abstractly of moving. Texas, on Dental Town, you always hear, oh, economy in Texas is better. Economy in Texas is better. When I got that job, the one I was talking about actually was right around 2008. It was literally a month, I think, before 2007, maybe. It was very soon before the whole economy collapsed. And literally when that all went down, it affected New York City immediately. Like, I know it kind of trickled out. It took a little while for some parts of the country to feel it until everyone's kind of feeling it, but it felt it literally like the next day. I had a bunch of patients that were from, I can't remember now, but all those law firms and finance places that were coming in because their insurance was about to run out because they lost their jobs. I had several of those. But anyway, so supposedly the economy in Texas was better. So, okay, let's think about Texas. So the course was in San Antonio. I drove to Austin. I drove around San Antonio. I drove to Houston and some other places. We were thinking were the Carolinas, just basically places that people like, people that, coming from New York City, it would be difficult for me to go into the middle of the country, not the kind of middle of the country, but, the rural, even though that's probably the best idea if you want to do the best in business, quickest. And I knew that, but at the same time, we went to Austin and we loved it. We just loved it. We were here, just a day or two, whatever it was, but we loved Austin. So that was like, oh, let's look into Austin more. But also going to the Breakaway just gave us wow, he pushes startups is more what he preaches. I don't know if that's on purpose, but that's what he teaches. So that's what he talks about more. So I was like, oh, well, let's do a startup now. And it was partially that and all partially that I was just so burnt out of doing everything someone else's way and all these other ways that I knew a whole lot of what not to do. didn't really know what to do yet, but I knew a whole lot of what not to do. And at least with Breakaway, I had some type of a path to start.
Basis point. Yeah.
Yeah, something. So
you picked your city. You picked your city. You've got your basis set up by going to Breakaway practice seminars, which is a place that I actually recommend a lot of my clients go to when they come into me and say, "Hey, we're thinking about either buying a practice or starting a practice." As soon as they start going down that starting a practice route, say, "Okay, you need to go to Breakaway because it's something like $2,000 or even less than that, and you're going to make that money back, 100 times over, maybe 10 times over, just in that day's worth of information on how to do a better job."
I mean, if you're building from scratch, then I think you'll save. He says it, and I kind of agree. I mean, you'll save $100,000 on build up, as opposed to the old way, which is you have no one to rely on but the people selling you stuff. Which I don't care what you're doing, but that's always a bad idea. Yeah, and that's how it's been done for who knows how long, and that's what are you gonna do? But you don't know anything else. So the only person who's gonna hold your hands, the guy holding, also making a profit for you, is probably not a good idea.
But they'll do your design for free.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing's free, right? So okay, so you got the basis set up, you've got the location picked out. Now you're looking for, I'm assuming you got at least your city picked out. How did you actually narrow in on a specific location?
So I did look a little bit at the demographics, and I knew Austin was a growing city, and I knew that it was probably not the best place to move. I mean, there are places that are better. There are a ton of places that are probably better, but you got to weigh your choices as far as where you want to live, and also the demographics. Demographics are huge. I mean, I would have loved to live in California. I have friends that I have family that lives in California, but California is probably the one place that has a worse reputation than New York for dentistry. Just ton of corporations, ton of these type of big mill practices, and so that would be hard as well. So that was out of the picture. So anyway, we're moving to Austin. Found out that I could not get my license through reciprocity. So that was a big stopping point. I called up. I was looking at papers. I couldn't find anything. So let me call them up. I said, "Hey, you say you have reciprocity here. It says they do on their website or wherever it was that I was looking." And they're like, "But I don't see any place that says how I get my license. I see a place where you want me to submit my, NERV scores or board scores. But I have reciprocity, and you says that you accept that." And they're like, yeah, but you have to submit your board scores. And I was like, yeah, but I don't have that. I just got my license. And they're like, no, you have to submit your board scores. And I was like, okay. So basically, there's people who are taking their board, they practice you need both, basically. And it was a relatively new thing that New York was the first state that you can get your license that way. So my whole plan of that was out the window. So that took a year to get my license, to move out. That's another reason why it took so long to get out of there. Because I took the boards, so I had to basically go back to school, and I've been practicing several years. I've done implant continuums, I was placing implant. I feel like I was getting better. I got my fellowship before I moved in the Academy of General Dentistry, so I've taken a lot of CE at that point, and here I have got to go back to take the boards. So I had to go find amalgam, which I hadn't done in several years, and the whole thing.
That's been really frustrating to me. I think I'd probably said, well, is Austin really the place I want to go after that?
I have several friends that thought about moving, but they would not want to do that. And it wasn't easy. I took it. I had to sign up for it 3 times. The first time I failed because they said I didn't even get to start my class 2 filling. They told me that the lesion was too small in the x-ray, and that was it. And I failed. And I know what a class 2, I've been practicing for 4 or 5 years at that point. I know what a cavity looks like. I showed it to several of my colleagues before I went. Like, this is good. You think it's good, right? Yeah, it's good. And I get there, and some elderly dentist, like, nope. And I'm like, okay. And you only give it a few times a year. So what happened was I signed up for the next one, which was like 4 months later. And it's like a week before, 10 days before. And I hadn't got my paperwork, what seat am I in or something. And I call them up, and I'm like, "Where's my paperwork? I signed up to take it again. I haven't got anything." And they're like, "Oh, you haven't taken the written part yet, because it's the written part that you could take it at a testing center. It's not taken at the same time. It just has to be taken within a year." And I was like, "Yeah, I wasn't really concerned about that. I thought it'd be easy." So I was like, I was just going to take that when I was done with the other parts. So like, no, you have to take all the parts before you can retake any of them. And I was like, well, why didn't someone, I signed up months ago. Why didn't someone not tell me that when I sent it in? So I missed that session, and then I had to do it. So I had to go take that, and then I took it again 4 months later. So it was a nightmare. It took me a year. The only plus side on that was that I was getting married at the time, and we were doing that in New York and in New Jersey, and so we were kind of there anyway. But still, it was quite, you know, a lot of people, a lot of dentists have their nurse horror stories and boards horror stories, and I thought I got away with not having any of them because I did the residency, but no, I got mine.
Earned your stripes.
Yeah. So basically, to get to Austin, we picked Austin. We loved it. We spent a weekend looking for a place to live and looking for jobs, interviewing at several places. Some guy offered me a job, gave me a job. I said, oh, thank you. He came like on the spot. I was like, let me just tell you in a few days. And we came back. We're like, all right, we're moving. We got a job. We got a place to live, an apartment. And then like 3 days later, he calls me back and he's like, yeah, I'm not giving you the job. You're too good for this, basically, is what he told me. He wouldn't be happy here, which he may be right, because I was just trying to take any job to get there. But still, I was like, okay, that sucks. So then I took a job with a corporate place, the biggest, you know, pretty much the biggest corporation in the country, Smiles brand. And they have Castle's their branch in Austin, what they call them. They were going to pay for my move, but this is my first official corporate job. So I come in, but you know, I was like, well, I know what I'm doing, my own practice. That's the goal, so I'm fine with it. That lasted. I got there, and it was a job, and it lasted 6 months, I think. You know, about 6 months. But and it was, that's a whole nother story about how they screwed up. But they basically are marketing against themselves because they opened so many in the Austin area at the same time. But so they didn't have enough patients for me either. But it was just a typical corporate stuff I've dealt with before, and I knew I wasn't staying. Yeah, a few nightmares in Austin, but I stayed about 6 months to make sure that we wanted to live there. So we moved there, like, okay, we're going to practice, but let's just make sure. So we didn't even work on it barely at all for about 6 months. We just wanted to make sure.
I really like that. I think that a lot of people probably don't take that time. You know, they're chugging ahead and just assume they're gonna like the place after they move there. I like the fact that you stay there for 6 months beforehand, and then said, okay, yes, this is a place we want to live. We validated that this is a place that we can, you know, we can be a family. We can not, you know, come home every night and be like, what are we gonna do tonight? You know, there is a living aspect of all this thing too. So that's really good insight. I like that one. So okay, so you've been there 6 months. You know where you're happy with Austin. How did you start actually finding a place for a location? Because I assume in being there for 6 months, at that point, even though you weren't actively searching, you probably had your eyes open, and your ears open as well to different areas that were coming up and saying, you know, that might work out over there.
Yeah. Well,
is that right?
Coming to Austin, I knew that it's competitive. You know, but I also, you know, basically I knew I wanted the outskirts. You go to downtown anywhere, it's gonna be it's gonna be all the same problems downtown New York has. You know, so I was looking on the outskirts. We just drove around. You know, there's a lot of different ways to do it. We've kind of started looking at places like you can look on obviously on Google and looking for I believe. You know, Dr. Pham, who we've had on here, he talks about that sometimes. And so looking on Google where the dentists are. And I did work with Practice Cafe at the time, which happens to be located in Austin, actually, which I didn't even know when I moved here. You know, a marketing company, dental marketing company, and they have a demographics service. And there was another one I didn't use. I don't know if it's still around. I think it's McDonald, I believe, Scott McDonald. That sounds familiar. He had a different service. I don't think I used them, but I remember looking into it. But just again, same thing. I you know, it come in spurts. But when I got out of school and hated my job, and then I started again, I would just spend hours reading Dental Town. Just hours, reading all the threads on people who started up. Just trying to gather as much information as I could, but also trying to figure out logistically how to do it. And to be honest, that's the hardest thing, and it's something that it's very difficult for me, and I think a lot of dentists out there, to wrap their mind around, because Um, it's not a do A, then do B, then do C process. It is do A, B, C, F, and G all at the same time. And, you know, a lot of dentists like myself are, you know, we took sciences and we're trying to understand something 100% completely before moving on, and you can't do that. You can't. It doesn't work that way. There's too many pieces. There are some resources. I know, like I listened to your podcast with what's his name, Jamie Amos. I don't really know him, but you know, that's a resource out there that wasn't out there at the time. And I know he says he offers something where it may help with that, and that it's an outline. But even I'm sure with that outline, it's not. You can't do one thing at a time, and that's something that's really hard for me to wrap my brain around. And as you get closer to it and to building a practice from scratch, the more you realize you're juggling these pieces. So for me, coming from zero business background, I don't have any family members who are dentists or any business for that fact. They all were someone who had a job, worked for some company. I had zero. Role models, dentists based in California, and so limited. You know, I can ask him some questions, but he also started his practice 35 years ago. You know, even before you were allowed to market as a dentist, you weren't allowed to market as a dentist until 77 or 78, and even then it was frowned upon for 10, 15 years. So a very different mentality. So zero from personal help. It was all so. And another thing on that is that. I am not an extroverted person naturally. I'm not an organized person naturally. Was just like a lot of people in dental school. Like I said, I wasn't taught my class. I would wait until the last minute. I would cram for tests. I would, you know, I guess I would be an okay test taker. I wouldn't be able to get where I got, but and to be this, you do have to start being organized. You do have to change yourself a little bit. And some of those things that I would do in addition to learning about dentistry at time is I would get a notebook. I started writing lists. You know, I have my lists from when I first started, and they were all over the place. I had no method to my madness at the time, but I would start writing things down. That's huge. That's his first step. You know, you hear that with anything, but with this, you know, what is your goal? What is your dream? What is your vision? But also, just write stuff down, okay, you know, and I just started writing lists, and okay, I got to do this, and it was a mess, but still, it was down on paper. That sounds like a silly advice, but I couldn't run my business without a book right now and a pen, or however you want to do it, from your iPhone or something. But so that was that. I also started listening to. I know some people think it's corny, but you know, I started listening to Tony Robbins stuff, and that stuff that has helped me immensely, and other self-help things like that. And not so much as those are not the specifics that you'll learn from Breakaway and things like that, but just for the mentality. And you don't have to be that. You don't have to be born that way. You know, you have to be like me, who was just get to a point where you're fed up with something, and that's where change comes from for a lot of people. If you don't, you know, yes, it was just, that's what I was kind of wanted to do this podcast. I feel there are some dentists who are outgoing and know what they want, and either have a parent who's a dentist, or they have a good mentor and they want to emulate that person, or somehow they have this vision and they know what they want and they go and get it, and they start a year out, 2 out of school, and they're taking CE courses while they're in school, and that's awesome. But I think there's way more who just stumble along. We take tests. Okay, we're a dentist. Okay, we made it. Great. Oh crap, this sucks. What do I do now? And there's no answer what you do now. You take baby steps, and that's what you write down. These baby steps, and they do add up, and you keep working at it. And I'm still working at it, and you know, I changed myself that way, but it's not easy. It's not, you know, I'm naturally introverted. I naturally want to sit on the couch and watch TV. But at some point, like I said, you either get fed up or you just decide you want to do something. And that's what happened to me. And I feel like that's what happened to a lot of people. And it took me, you know, it was 7 years out of school before I opened my own practice. And there are guys who have been out longer or less. And, you know, if you want something changed, keep looking for that magical associateship that some people, I guess, find, or you can create your own vision and dream, and that's what I'm working on. But it takes work, and that's the first step, writing stuff down.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, we went over a lot there. First of all, I'm a big believer in self-improvement as well. I've not done much of Tony Robbins stuff, but I know a lot of people that do, and he's kind of the penultimate self-improvement person out there right now, it seems like. And as far as the writing things down goes, I was a child of the internet age and of itself, as far as being online, computers and things like that. I'm fairly technologically savvy, and I always thought that whenever I'd heard from other people that they would write things down, I was like, I'll just open up a Word document or get something on Excel or type it into my phone or send myself an email to remind myself of all this. Now, all those little tools and hacks I have their own place, but literally, whenever I went out and started my own accounting firm, my first purchase was a stack of yellow legal pads. Just a stack of yellow legal pads, because I knew I was going to blow through them. And I'll probably get another stack every couple months, just because every day when I come in, I've got my list of things to do that day. You got to be guided. And like you said, whenever you start a business, there's no A, B, C, D, E, F, G in a top, there's a top of the list down to the bottom. It's really more of a left to right, and all of those items flow at different speeds going down, and they all have to be done somewhat concurrently. And I tell a lot of new practice owners that your job as a dental practice owner, as a business owner, changes from being while obviously the clinical aspect is very important. It changes from being you don't anticipate the problems all the time. A lot of the times it's coming into a problem, figuring out a quick solution that makes that go away, and then if it's a big problem, you make sure that you set something up that make that not happen again. But in the end, a business owner is, a lot of the times, your job is to fix little problems and get past it. And a lot of the times it's to delegate those problems somewhere else, to have somebody else to take care of it. So that
another skill to learn is the delegation. I mean, especially when you first start out, you're doing most of it. You're doing almost all of it. But at the same time, I'm a big believer, like I said, education, but part of it is also finding those people like yourself or whoever you find to help you. I mean, I said it before, and you've heard people say it before, I invented nothing. I just steal ideas from everyone. I hold as many people hold my hand as I can. I try to find people who done it before me, people who, and it's going to be for different things. You're going to need different help. You're going to need a lawyer. You're going to need someone, a CPA. You're going to need someone who's built a practice before. You don't do any of those things. You don't know how to do it. You're not going to become a lawyer. You're not going to become a CPA. You're not going to learn how to build things. You're a dentist, but you are going to learn how to get the right people around you to help you. And that's a big thing as well, kind of putting that team together. And it's obviously true in a dental practice, your immediate team, your assistants, your front office, but as far as there's more pieces to it. And that's, hopefully, one of my team members is my wife also. I was as good as brave as I sound to move across the country and do all that stuff. I don't know if I could have done that without my wife. I mean, I left all my family behind, but that's, and she's also, while I'm very introverted, she's the opposite. So we kind of complement ourselves that way. She was a speech and debate champion and coach, and she's in sales and has been for pretty much since she was 15 years old.
So you win zero arguments, is what you're saying?
Yeah. I don't like it. Doesn't. I was like, it's not fair. I'm not going to argue. I know my point, but you're going to use logic and try to make me wrong when I'm just angry. So, But anyway, but that's part of the team, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, she doesn't work at the office right now, though I'm trying to convince her to, but it's the same thing. I mean, it could be a friend. It could be, reaching out to dentists on Dental Town who live in your area, people that, I find, not everyone, but, when people reach out to me, I like helping. That's why I'm doing this podcast. Like you said, I'm not selling anything. I just find it fun to talk about this stuff to other dentists or about it.
And just to be clear to everyone out there, I would prefer all of our interviews be exactly like this one. I like to talk to dentists that are doing it. It's just that, you know, sometimes it's harder to find people that don't have something to sell to come on something that in an interview process. It's a lot easier for me to be able to find people that have some type of product or reaching their audience is my audience. And so it makes a lot of sense for them to come on and talk to me about their stuff. And there's, you know, I try to get some information out of those people to try and help people as well. But, you know, that's, if I had a perfect world, it would be every interview just like this one. So, you know, we're kind of getting close on time. Do you have a little bit more to be able to talk some more?
Yeah, sure. Which one? Let's see. So
you found the place for the location of the practice, and you know, and if we actually need to, if you have enough time, I don't mind us splitting this up into two episodes, of being one about getting to the point where you're opening your practice, and the next one being about actually, you know, the start of your practice and things that happened in that process.
Yeah, I have time, so whatever you want.
Okay, good. So we may just go with that. So you've gotten to the point where you're actually... A special thanks to Dr. Jarrett for coming on the show with us today. I'm really excited for you guys to hear part 2 of this really great story. The first part of this was, you know, getting from his associate days into about to start his own practice. The next part, we're going to talk about just about starting his practice and the things that he went through, lessons learned, experiences, and things like that. It's going to be really fun. So he's a real life example of someone who's experienced tough times and he pushed through it. And the reality is that we all experience tough times in our careers, dentistry, and in life. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of self-development. So for today's bonus, I've recorded a short clip for you to listen to when you're in the middle of dealing with tough situations in your career. To get that bonus clip, simply text PRACTICE to 33444. That's PRACTICE to 33444, or visit startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus if you're outside of the U.S. In our next episode, a continuation from today, Dr. Hulse is going to share more on the actual experience he had in setting up his practice, so you don't want to miss it. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast now to ensure you get that episode and more to come each week. So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan VanHorn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Start Your Dental Practice community. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and go to startyourdentalpractice.com/iTunes to leave your honest feedback and review on iTunes. It's going to help me create a better experience, a better show, a better podcast for you, the ambitious dentist. Your feedback really does help, regardless if you like the show today or not. If you didn't like the show, let me know, because it's going to help me create a better show and podcast for you. Lastly, if you know of anybody that would benefit from today's episode and today's content, today's guest, please feel free to share with them on social media or through email.